So we're going to talk about the tabernacle. Actually, the story should begin with a Haftorah, because in a synagogue, they would be going through Exodus 30, 11 to 16, when they'd be talking about the half shekel, because they're announcing to everybody for the next 4 weeks, make sure that the males, make sure that you've turned in your half shekel by the 1st of Nisan. And this is part of the plan that God had a long time ago in preparation for the day that Haman was going to end up giving hundreds of shekels to Ahasuerus in order to eliminate all of the Jewish people. And so this was a prerequisite, this was ahead of time, trying to stop it. But we want to talk about the tabernacle, and in particular, I want you to go back to Exodus chapter 25, and I intend to read quite a bit of the portion tonight. My focus is going to be eventually on 2 of the pieces of furniture. I want to talk about the Ark of the Covenant itself, and then I want to talk about the menorah. In the beginning, in chapter 1, or in chapter 25, verse 1, it says, Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and let them take for me a portion. Not give me a portion, take for me a portion. Why does he use the word take and not the word give? Well, when you go through looking at the list of the things that are going to be given, how many of those things would have been readily available to them? How much wood would they have been carrying in the wilderness? Now, Rashi said, in order to try to explain this, Rashi went to the point of saying, well, Jacob, when he came down, planted the trees in order for it to be fully grown by the time they leave, which makes sense, except as we were going through last week, we were talking about the fact that it's not actually in the Sinai where Mount Sinai is, but it's actually in Saudi Arabia. And we know Jacob never went to Saudi Arabia. So how did the trees manage to get there before he arrived? We also know that there were some things, dyes that he would take from worms and other things that would not easily be found where they were at. And you don't normally take a worm with you. So there's got to be some understanding. And so the understanding seems to be, for most of the sages, is the understanding that actually what happened was that at this particular point in time, they went to the local grocery store, the local lumber yard, and all of the other places to take the materials from there to build the tabernacle. That seems to help make me feel better about it. But it's only a partial answer. I want you to go to looking down at verse number 8 for a second. Now they shall make for me a sanctuary, or make a sanctuary for me, so that I may, and my text says, dwell among them. But in the Hebrew, it's dwell in them. Quite a difference in the understanding. Like everything that I show you, the form of the tabernacle and the form of its vessels, and so shall you do. So God has originally, while Moses was on the mountain, showed him all of the materials that were needed, what they should look like, how they should be created. One of the problems that he's going to have is dealing with trying to make the menorah, which we're going to get into in the story later. But as he's going through this list, it's very interesting that he specifically talks about the furniture first. Now, when he goes to his architect, to his designer, remember his designer is Bezalel. Bezalel is the grandson of Miriam. He is a real prodigy, because remember, what were the occupations of the Jews when they were living in Egypt? Well, they were agriculture, they did farming, they grew straw, those kinds of things, and they built buildings, they made bricks. But none of them spent time in the jewelry business. None of them spent time fabricating. All of these were skills that all of a sudden became part of them. They were innate. And innate in Bezalel was an understanding of how to build and how to do things. He actually, according to the Kabbalists, was able to understand how the letters were put together. So he could create the furniture the way they were supposed to be, or the vessels the way they were supposed to be. And so it became very apparent that he understood. Now, Moses gave the furniture first because Moses wanted them to see the Ark of the Covenant. He wanted to have them see the presence of God. Well, Bezalel said that doesn't work. We already found out what happened when we even got a glimpse of him. Remember how the words were on the mountain and how it killed us? We all died from the fright. And we had to ask you to go up there and get the words yourself. And whatever you hear, we shall do. So Bezalel said, let's do the thing correctly. Let's build the structure, put the vessels in the structure, and then later on, because you know that when they were in the land during the days of Samuel, remember Eli's sons took the ark oftentimes out to battle, out to war. In fact, they lost it in one of the wars, remember? So the ark was going to be seen sooner or later, but the question was when? And the answer was later. So as we begin to look at this, Moses is going to be the role of the visionary, but Bezalel is going to be the role of the realist. He understands, and that's the way things are going to go. Now, two pieces of furniture were more complicated than the rest. The one piece, the first piece, was the menorah. So I want to look at the menorah for a second, and well, more than a second. I want to take time to look at it, and that's in verse 10. All right. They shall make me an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. You shall cover it with gold from within and from without. You shall cover it, and you shall make on it a golden crown all around. So he's giving him the directions for building this ark. The ark is going to be made out of acacia wood. And again, where did they get the acacia? Was it already there? At that point in time, he gives them dimensions. Notice he gives them half dimensions. He gives them a full number and a half number. Why is God dealing in halves? He's really dealing with people. You see, that half is to represent them. The whole is to represent him. And so as he begins to go through the dimensions of it, he says, you're going to make it this way, and you shall cover it with gold from within and without, and you shall make the golden crown around it. The crown was the ribbon that was around it. Remember, there were 3 pieces of furniture that had that crown around them. The first one is here, that's the ark. The second one's going to be the table of showbread. And the third one will be the ark, or the altar of incense. Those 3 are all going to have crowns. And that I'll get into next week. But the understanding is that that crown was significant. So as we go through this, then we're going to begin to understand. You're going to also put in it, you shall have cast it with 4 rings of gold and place them in the 4 corners, 2 rings on its one side and 2 rings on its other side. And you shall make staves of acacia wood and cover them with gold, and insert the staves in the rings on the sides of the ark, which carry the ark, and the staves shall remain in the ark. And remember, we had a problem. Remember the first time David tries to bring the ark back up, the staves were not in it. They simply put the altar, or put the ark on the wagon to haul them up there. But even so, I want you to notice the problem that you're going to have with this wood that's gilded. The weight of the ark. Now remember, how many stones are actually in the ark? 4. The first set of ark stones were put in the ark also. Now we have a second set of sapphire stones on top of that. The weight of the stones, the weight of the ark itself, was more than a man could carry and more than a stave could hold. It would have broken if it were not for the fact that a miracle occurred every time they picked it up. The ark carried them. they didn't carry the ark. That was one of the miracles that was going to happen continually as they go through the desert. Now, in the process of this carrying of this ark that they're going to do, you shall place the ark of testimonial tablets that I shall give you. And notice I said there were both sets of tablets. Now, originally there were going to be two arks, because you see, Moses was supposed to take a second ark up to pick up the second set of tablets. He came down, they broke, they put the tablets into a box. The box is called an aron. Now, aron does mean box, but aron also means coffin. So God had the first set of stones put into this coffin. Now we're going to come back down. He's got a second set. They too will be put into the coffin. Besides those being in the coffin, at the end of Deuteronomy, we have Moses having created Torah scrolls for each of the 12 tribes, 13 tribes actually, because the Levites are going to have one for their own. And there'll be one that will be placed into the ark. Now, the reason it's going to be put into the ark is because it'll be a testimony to the fact that what has been written has not changed. It's the same as it was even in the days of Moses. So there's 14 Torah scrolls. One of them goes into the ark. Now, also, eventually, what's going to lay in front of the ark will be the rod that Aaron carried, and a kalel or bowl that has the manna in it. Those all will be found in the Holy of Holies. So as we begin to look at our story, we're looking at a box, a coffin. And in this coffin are the stones. And the stones are so heavy they cannot be carried by a man. But what's even worse is the top of this whole thing. I want you to look at number 17. You shall make a cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits in length, a cubit in height and width, or a cubit and a half in width, and make sure you shall make 2 kurvim of gold. Hammered out shall you make them from both ends of the cover, and you shall make 1 kuruv from the end of one side and 1 kuruv from the end of the other. From the cover you shall make the keruvim at 2 ends. The keruvim shall be with wings spread upward, sheltering the cover of their cover with their wings, and with their faces towards one another. Towards the cover shall their faces of the keruvim. You shall place the cover on the ark from above, and into the ark you shall put the testimonies that I shall give you. It is there that I will set my meetings with you, and I shall speak with you from on top of the cover, from between the 2 korvim and the ark of testimony of the tablets, everything that I shall command you to this children of Israel. Okay, back to the story. So he makes a cover. The cover is made out of gold, just like the rest of it. But notice, out of the gold on the top, he's to carve 2 korvim, meaning that top is 1 piece of gold, not 3 pieces of gold, but 1 piece of gold with the 2 korvim at the top. Now, when you stop to think about that, I guess it's possible. But how thick was that gold when he began? As he began to create for himself these 2 angels, as we would say, looking at one another, which would be hard enough, except for the fact that according to the Midrash and some of the writings in the Talmud, we know that the 2 angels looked at each other when God and Israel were on the same wavelength. And the 2 angels looked away from each other when there was opposition between the 2. So not only are you building a top that's fixed, but 2 of the fixtures on the top actually move. can be rotating. Imagine what that would look like. I haven't got a good picture yet. Now, I did see the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I got a picture of what the Raiders of the Lost Ark picture was. But again, like the many pictures I've looked at, nobody is certain exactly what it was that this ark looked like. All we have is this short description and short sections within the Talmud that give us very little information other than what we have here. Now, some of them seem to be embossed with something on the sides of the chest. We know that there was this crown around the top. We know everything about it. But again, we never saw it. And again, Bezalel never saw it. Bezalel, the only way he could have understood how to build this ark is by the letters that were used in this story. You see, creation was made by words. God said, and it happened. So the words themselves become very, very important. And it was Bezalel, with his genius mind, who was able to break down the letters to build exactly what it was that God wanted him to build. That Moses verified was actually what it was. So we begin by building this portable ark that's too heavy to carry, but yet at the same time, we know that it carried itself. As you're going along and thinking about it, understand that this ark was extremely special. Now, some scientists will tell you that what he built was actually a machine, an electrical machine, because of the gold, the wood, and all that was built into it, that it actually had a communication device to it. But the device wasn't inside. According to God, the device was on the outside, because God would sit on the seat, the kaperet, between the two angels. That's where he would speak to him from. That's where he would talk to him. Now, in the time of the first temple, almost all, and I can't use the word all because Ezekiel was not in Israel, nor was he near the city of Jerusalem at the time that he began to prophesy. He was outside the land, but all the rest actually were in the land and probably were close to the actual temple itself when they received their instructions. Quite a difference between all of them. But God spoke from the top of the ark. Now, in speaking from the top of the ark, he gave us some other information. Let me go on and let's talk about the menorah next. So I want you to turn to the menorah, which is on the next page, 31, verse 31. Now, when everything was assembled, it's important for you to understand everything from the gate was on the eastern side, due east. The back of the tabernacle, the back wall, was on the extreme west side. North and south were right and left. The directions were perfect because of the understanding of, well, it's a Kabbalistic understanding of the idea of directionality. God, in the very beginning, in chapter 1 of Genesis, spoke in terms of direction. So we're looking at actually what amounts to space and time all at the same time, and I shouldn't have gone there. Let's go to 31. You shall make a menorah of pure gold, hammered out shall the menorah be made. Its base, its shaft, its cups, its knobs, its blossoms shall be hammered from it. Okay. He's given one piece of gold, one solid piece of gold. And now he is supposed to chisel whatever word you want to use, this lamp. Now, again, we have another example of have we ever seen the menorah? I know I have two replicas in my cabinets, which are nice, fluted and everything else. The only problem with that is gold is soft. All of those curls would have weighed a ton, and then you put oil inside and the metal would have fallen, except for the miracle of God. Now, also remember, or hope you heard before, but I'll tell you now, Moses got these directions 3 times. Each time he received them, he tried to conceive in his own mind how it was made. By the time he arrived back down at the bottom of the mountain to tell Bezalel what it was, or to tell the people what it was that he was talking about, he had forgot. Eventually, Bezalel is actually going to build the menorah without the help of Moses. Now, some people say that Bezalel didn't build it at all, that really God did. He simply formed this whole thing by himself. Either way, you're looking at something that is very, very difficult to build out of material that's very, very soft and pliable. You're going to fill it with oil. You're going to heat the lamps. Could they cause something to happen to the gold? Could they begin to melt it? Hard to tell. But he begins there. And notice what it says. It's going to have 6 branches shall emerge from its sides, 3 branches of the menorah from its one side, and 3 branches of the menorah from the second side. 3 cups engraved like almonds on each branch, and a knob and a flower, and 3 cups engraved and almonds on the next branch. So he's developing an understanding of something that's going to be attached to these knobs that he's listing over here. So he's got 6 plus 1. The 7th lamp in the middle is something he doesn't talk about. He just simply says it's in the middle. But the 6 lamps on the sides, he begins to describe. And actually the 7th one has the same materials, but it's not described in the same way. And he goes through and he says that he's going to have these menorahs, 3 on each side, and the 3 cups engraved like almonds. 3 cups engraved like almonds. Now, if you've got your menorah, take a look at it. What are the 3 almonds that's there? What did he do with them? What did he engrave upon them? Well, if you go and look, you'll find that you're going to actually have 3 almonds on the 6th of them and 4 almonds on the middle staff. What do they mean? Those are the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. God is building into this system. When he gets the priest's wardrobe, he'll have what's called the Urim and Thummim. And he will use that and the reflected light bouncing off of those knobs that actually will give him information. That's how the high priest will communicate with God. So these branches and these almonds are significant. The cups on the top are significant because each cup on the top had 7 wicks in it. Now, as we go through this, well, let me continue on. Look at verse 35. The knob shall be under 2 of the branches from it, and a knob under 2 of the branches from it, and a knob under 2 of the branches from it, for the 6 branches emerging from the menorah. Their knobs and branches shall be in it, and all the single hammered piece of gold. All out of a single hammered piece of gold. You shall make its lamps 7, and he shall kindle its lamps. So you've got 7 lamps, 7 wicks in each of the lamps to give light towards the face, or towards its face, not towards your face. The lamp is to light itself. It's to expose itself. Its tongs and its spoons shall be of pure gold. of a talent of pure gold shall it be with all the vessels. See and make according to their form, for that you are shown on the mountain. So he's shown, he can't remember. Bezalel wasn't shown. Bezalel is responsible for making it. It doesn't appear, according to half of the scholars, that he made it, that actually God created it. Others say no, he was given enough information because Bezalel means in the shadow of him. So he was in his mind, was able to create what's there. So we have 7. Now the question is, how does it look? How does it face? When you walk into the tabernacle, if you were able to as a Cohen, when you walked into the tabernacle, the first thing you saw inside were 3 pieces of furniture. On the left side would have been the menorah. On the right side would have been the table of showbread. And on the back middle would have been the altar of incense. And then behind the curtain would have been the Ark of the Covenant. Now let's go back to the menorah, because you see the menorah, there are 2 ways. Remember, the tabernacle is built east to west, north and south are on the outsides. Which direction did the menorah face? Was it facing east-west? Was it facing north and south? Doesn't make much sense. Doesn't seem hard, except for the fact that the menorah, remember, was supposed to hold oil, and they would light it in the afternoon towards evening, and it would go all night. And in the morning when they arrive, only one of the wicks was actually burning still. That one was called the easterly wick. Then the question came, because it's in the Talmud that way, the question came, okay, well, which one's the east? Well, Rashi said, obviously the east means the one that is closest to the door. That would be east. No, that can't be it. It's got to be the one on the far side, because that's closest to the menorah. Maimonides, Rambam, says, no, it's the middle one. Well, wait a second. Which way is it? Which one is it? You see, it's never been understood which was the easterly. So here you have this menorah that is burning. You have no copies of it, because remember, they're gone. They were buried. Who buried them? Well, according to non-scriptured books, the Maccabean books, Jeremiah was the one who actually buried all of the materials. And he buried it in a cave called the Cave of the Column. That's what Maccabee says. So he buried it in the Cave of the Columns. A friend of mine from a long time ago, and a friend that I still have, which is Larry Borntrager, have been looking for the ark, for all of it in the Cave of the Columns, but they can't get in because of all the things that are going on. And I don't think that the government, which is not religious, is going to help them to let them in. It'll only be in the last days that anything will happen. Turn to your Bibles back to Amos 9, the last chapter of the book of Amos. I want you to notice these verses. Go down to verse 9, 9:9. For behold, I decree that I will shake out the house of Israel among all the nations, as grain is shaken in a sieve, and not a pebble shall fall to the ground. They will perish by the sword, and the sinners of my people, those who say, not because of us will the evil approach us any sooner. But on that day, I will raise up the fallen booth of David. I will repair their breaches and raise it up its ruins, and I will build it up as in the days of old, so that they upon whom my name is called may inherit the remnant of Edom. In all the nations, the word of Hashem, who shall do this. Behold, the days are coming. The fallen booth, the sukkah, or the tabernacle. In the last days, which I believe we're in those days, this tabernacle will be found. Now, according to Vendell Jones and those who have worked with him, and some of the archaeologists who were his friends before he passed away, believe that it's sitting in the Cave of the Columns, totally upright, totally in place, all of the artifacts where they should be, that this cave is that big. That is one source. Yes, that's true. It's just one source. But I like my friends, so I have to believe them. As we go through this whole process of talking about putting this all together, understand that God has built this building for a purpose. Now, he replaced it after a period of time, because remember, originally it was at Shiloh. And at Shiloh, and finally the Philistines destroyed the place. And in the destruction, the tabernacle moved from there to a place called Nov, which is where David was and where David found himself needing food. And they gave him not only the food, but they also gave him the sword of Goliath. After that, the tabernacle appears to disappear completely, not to be seen again. But again, some people say that it was taken into the temple and put underneath the building itself, down in the caverns below. Others say that when Jeremiah was alive and they knew that they were about to be overtaken by the Babylonians, that all of that equipment was moved down to the Cave of the Column. That's where it was at. Lori said, yes, I did, according to the directions from Zoom that I used. Sorry about that. I read a wrong message. So that was moved down or taken away from that particular place. It doesn't tell us what's going to happen. I forgot one thing I wanted to tell you about the Korvim. Can we go back to the Korvim earlier? Like the menorah itself, like the ark, neither of them are understood. We have many pictures of what the Korvim looked like. One of those pictures may be right. The one that probably is closest is probably the one that is found in the Israel, in Jerusalem. And it's by the temple people. But even so, a Korvim, a cherub, what does a cherub look like? Genesis chapter 4 deals with the exile of Adam and Eve from the garden. Do you remember that? They were taken from the garden, and in order to keep Adam from returning and taking of the tree of life and continuing the idea of sin, God put two Korvim, two cherubs, at the edge of the garden, gave them giant swords, and they stood there. Now, Rashi will point out that a cherub had a face of a baby. A cherub had two wings and a body. But does the cherub that we find on the altar or on the ark look like the cherub that would have been there? Ibn Ezra said, if I want to understand the word Korvim, I have to understand metamorphosis. By that, he said, the Korvim take on multiple shapes. They're what you would call shapeshifters. Go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1. And I want you to look at the Corvim in chapter 1. In verse number 8, there were human hands under the wings of the four sides, and their faces and their wings were alike on the four of them. Their wings were joined one to another, just as they're joined one to another on the ark. They did not turn as they went, each in the direction that its faces would go. As for the likeness of their faces were like the likeness of a human face, a lion's face, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. Those were the four faces. Now I want you to go back to chapter 10 and see the same Corvim mentioned in chapter 10. In chapter 10, when we look at, I got to move over towards the light. I'm getting blind in my old age. Verse number 14, chapter 10. Each one had four faces. One of the faces, the face of the keruv, the face of a cherub. The second was the face of a man. The third was the face of a lion, and the fourth was the face of an eagle. Notice the difference. The ox disappears in the Corvim, the curv, the cherub appears. Did it change? And if it did, why did it? Is there something that we should meditate on as we begin to look at that? What should we actually see? That becomes part of the story of all of the things that Moses spoke to Bezalel that leave questions in the minds of the rabbis and the sages as they begin to go through and begin to pick apart and attempt to understand. Because you see, a cherubim is supposed to be the second level of an angel. First level of angels are the ones that we see during the times that they spoke to the patriarchs. They're men, Ishim. The second level is this level that seem to be with God. They seem to be doing God's bidding, whatever that is. That's who they are. But we lose track of what they look like. So when we go back to the ark itself and we go to the top of the ark, yes, it has wings, just like they both had wings. They had a face that was facing down. It does not say that they had a baby's face. It doesn't tell us anything about the body of the creature. The idea is the fact that there are many things that we don't know, which is the reason I started this lesson, is to tell you that I don't know anything about what's going on, but I wanted you to know that I was confused, and I wanted you to be as confused as I am. Not really. My point is the fact that the Word of God has secrets within it. Secrets that we're only going to find when we finally reach that place called the end of days, when the ark will actually be revealed, and we, if we're alive, will still see it. Because you see, it will march up to the mountain where the temple will be put, from wherever it's been hidden. Many have said that the ark itself is still underneath the mountain itself, that it's actually in one of the caves. That's been seen, but it still remains there until the temple is actually rebuilt. Then it will be gone, that it would appear again for all of us to see. But that's something that's in the future. So hopefully I gave you something to think about and questions to think on or to meditate on. Talk to me about some of the things that you're thinking, some of the things I should help explain to you better than I did before.